One of the best ways for you to write in the exam is if you have a very structured way of writing. So, after you've written your introduction and said who you're going to play in the scene that you're talking about, the best way to go from there is to work systematically through the text and to do three things. The first thing, make a point about what is going on in the play. The second thing, give some evidence for your point to back up your point. And then the third thing, give an example of how you would play the part. So let me give you an example.
So here's our exemplar answer. I should just note that when you're looking at this, to know where the answer has come from, the person who wrote this, one of my students, used the section in which Hale is trying to get Tituba to confess to performing witchcraft in the forest, which is in the first act towards the end when Tituba is forced to confess. So let's just take this section by section and break down the way that she has written based on the method that I've mentioned previously. She starts off by making a point about how Reverend Hale is thinking or feeling at that particular moment, because the way that you think or feel informs the way that you will play a character. So she says Hale is anxious to find out the truth about the situation being Abigail and Tituba and some other girls having danced in the forest. So she's made a very simple observation there. What qualifies it as a better piece of writing is because she goes on to mention further and to justify it further. So Hale is anxious to find out the truth about the situation. Because people are talking hostilely about killing Tituba, and this is making him listen carefully to everything that is being said. So she justifies that. She tells us how the character is feeling at that moment. She puts an interpretation on what she thinks the character is thinking, and you will be awarded for interpretation. Simple description is not something that you will be rewarded highly for. By telling us what's happening in the text, you're simply rewording what we already know. When you make an interpretation about how a character is feeling, then you get the higher marks because you're delving into the character's brain, if you like, and putting your own interpretation on it. You will be awarded for that. And where our student here has put the interpretation on it is where she has said, because people are talking hostilely about killing Tituba, and this is making him listen carefully to everything that is being said. She then ties this up with a little bit of evidence where she says, then you saw him, and she explains why she's using this quote. Don't just, when you're using evidence to back up your point, don't just use a quote arbitrarily from the text, like just lift it because it seems to prove your point. Take one which is very appropriate to the point that you're making. One of the best things you can use also is stage directions. They're a very underused thing in the exam. But stage directions tell us what a character is thinking or feeling, and they give us clues into what's going on. So, then you saw him shows he's taking notice of each word Tituba says. He jumps upon how she speaks about the devil, and he makes an assumption about her guilt. So she's noticing things in the text now which are not particularly obvious. She's making an analysis of it, and she's giving evidence to back it up. Now, this evidence isn't the best piece of evidence that she could have used, but she is using evidence at least. She then moves on to the example part. The example part has got to be detailed. I always express this to students as being something where you have to write as though you want to build a picture up in somebody's head of what it looks like. A good example of how you will play the part will be immediately noticeable in your mind, and you will be able to see what it would look like on stage. So you'll notice how she gives attention to detail in this example here. I'll read it out. If I was to play this part, I would stand firm with my eyes looking directly into hers to show his desperation for the truth. When I say, then you saw him, I would quickly place my arms outstretched on her shoulders, giving a little shake while I deliver my line. Once I say, then you saw him, I would pause while she cried, still having my eyes focused on hers, yet this time with a look of frustration and a quivered brow. This would be to show his annoyance, yet anger with her, as she still lacks the truth. So she gives an example, and then she justifies why she would play it that way. You can see from the example there that it's very clear. You can see what it would look like on stage, and it's very appropriate to how the character is thinking or feeling at this moment. She's not just saying anything, she's giving us appropriateness. So perhaps you should try that yourself. Have a look through one of the sections of the text that you've got and try and write point, evidence, example. It will be a useful framework for you when you're writing for the exam, and it means that you're not just writing anything, but on each line you can move through and you can make sure you make a point about how the character's feeling, you give evidence from the text to back that up, and then you give an example of how you will play the part.